Hello, welcome to the Restaurant Le Dungeon. Today's specials are succulent frog's legs, savory vegetable soup served inside a human pumpkin, and some worms I found in my compost. Oh, the decadence! We serve to fit all tastes, so please enjoy yourself to your heart's content. Anyway, we're talking about Delicious in Dungeon, or Dungeon Meshy if you've never touched a boob before. The show that answers questions like, do adventurers ever eat the monsters? If so, what do they taste like? Or, what supports all the monsters in the dungeon anyways? Is there some sort of ecosystem? Surely they don't all just stand around waiting on the next group of adventurers. Look, we all know that one really annoying guy who reads way too far into everything, and every time he tries to ask the hard-hitting questions, the urge to punch him in the throat rises a little more. But jokes and violent tendencies aside, this non-ironically answers those questions in a way we all can enjoy. Now I'm going to give somewhat of a quick story synopsis before we get into the meat and potatoes of this Monsterian cuisine of a story. It goes a little something like this. Some people discovered this dungeon that was essentially just a hole in the ground with ruins of an ancient kingdom in it, with lots of treasure and gold and whatnot. And to sweeten the deal for any would-be adventurers, upon the discovery, an old guy appeared and said, "If you do me a favor and kill the evil wizard at the bottom, you'll be king of my whole kingdom. Get it? Hole! It's in a hole! Haha!" Then just disappearing into a cloud of dust, probably making a sound or something. Fast forward some years and you got the main character Laios. He and his party make it pretty far in the dungeon, but they run into a red dragon on the later floors. Some stuff goes wrong, and his little sister Fallon, she's like the healer of the group, she gets snagged, but before she's swallowed by the dragon, she casts a teleportation spell so that the rest of the party can make it out alive. Now back on the surface with all their gold and most of their equipment gone due to a side effect of the spell. Laios of course wants to go back for his sister Fallon, but without their stuff or any gold, half the group effectively says, "Kah! Forget you noobs, we're gonna go get good somewhere else." With that, leaving us with just our main trio. Laios, the sword-wielding tall man, Marcel, the spell-casting half-elf, and Chilchuk, the half-foot handyman. Despite being down all the extra manpower, our lovable trio decides to go on this impossible mission anyway, really hoping that the power of friendship will lead them to victory. Though knowing that the friendship gods don't cover food expenses, Laios convinces the others that they'll have to eat the dungeon monsters in order to survive. This comes with a lot of protest, but seeing the severity of the situation, they come around. The party quickly realizes they have no idea how to cook this stuff, but luckily a dwarf by the name of Senji was watching them fail and probably repressing his inner Gordon Ramsay.
I'm gonna go fucking ballistic.
Hey guys, Boone the editor here, and I just realized that I mispronounced Senji's name as, Senji. And yeah, this persists throughout the entire video. So leave a comment pointing and laughing at my horrible mistake. Reason being that Senji just so happens to be surprisingly good at cooking monsters. He comes over, helps him out, introduces himself, and agrees to tag along so long as he's allowed to cook the red dragon after they kill it. And from there the stage is set for hilarity to ensue.
I think we just found our lunch.
That's gross!
Stop that, you idiot!
Yeah, I can never feel better.
It's delicious! Bread! 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 Shut your hole, you damn half-boy! Get your fingers in there and work that dough!
Despite the overarching plot of Laios and company trying to find their good buddy Fallon after a dragon found her delicious in the dungeon, the episodic plots essentially work as a monster of the week kind of format. Every episode has its new dungeon fantasy-inspired monster to be vanquished, with the added twist that the party has to figure out how to eat it after they defeat it. After they kill whatever monster popped out and went, "Boogity boo!" This week, the viewer is then treated to a delightful little bit where Senji walks us all through the process of cooking it. How he prepares the meat, what vegetables and herbs he gathered for the dish, etc. It's the fantasy equivalent of those cook-along shows your grandmammy used to watch on the Food Network. Kinda neat. And boy do they get creative with this gimmick. Of course you got the more obvious recipes, like basilisk are basically a giant chicken, so you cook it like one, or cooking giant scorpions like a lobster. But it gets crazier. Now if you played any video games or any tabletop games that have dungeon crawling in it, then you know that there are monsters that you find in dungeons like golems, living armor, ghost, things that any sane cook would look at and say, nope, can't do anything with that. But that's not the way a dungeon meshy, not this whack pack. No spoilers here, but the creativity on how they incorporate certain monsters into the cooking process is incredible, even if it's not directly eating the monster themselves. Now, in just about any adventure story, half the fun comes from the characters, how they interact with each other, what strengths and weaknesses they bring, and how they apply said strengths and weaknesses to whatever situation they get themselves into. As far as basic party roles go, you got nothing out of the ordinary for your average D&D campaign. I kinda already said it, you got your sword, your enchanted staff, and the pair of slick hands. With the addition of Senji, you got an extra battle axe adorned dwarf, which I personally think is a welcome addition to any situation. However, the true magic comes not from the battle axe being swung, but from the dwarf who swings it. For the tall man is much more than the sword he carries, the elf more than the spells she weaves, the half-foot greater than... Okay, you get it. Both personality-wise and ability-wise, all the members have areas they're good at and areas they're, well, not so good at. Let me explain. Laios, as you'd expect from the party leader, is the one making most of the plans the group plays by. He also has an unholy obsession with monsters, which is like 87% of the reason he wants to eat them, as you would come to find out. Because of this, he also serves as a monster encyclopedia anytime the story has some splaining to do about how certain monsters behave. Despite occasional flashes of brilliance, Laios is very much depicted as more of a lovable idiot type of character. His overenthusiasm with monsters, coupled with his inability to detect the social cues of his party members and others they run into, often gets the party in trouble as much as he's helping them get out of it. Generally, he has a very carefree demeanor until the monster of the episode shows up, and then suddenly...
At least tell me the number of nipples or with the token account!
Just like how Laios is the plot device that explains monsters and their monster shenanigans to the viewer, Marcel, being the party's fireball manufacturer, is that but for the various forms of magic in this world. Also, when Laios thinks of a plan that's a little too brain dead for the group, Marcel is typically the one to add a splash of intelligence to it. And before any of you go getting in your head that she is the very smart level-headed Gandalf of the group, know that that is the furthest thing from the case. This lady is a damn stress factory. The group can't even sit down and enjoy a nice fine bowl of stewed rat's tails or pickled merlurkais without her going, ew, yucky, blah! Senji, like I previously stated, is the one doing the majority of the monster cooking. He's also the closest thing to a wise old master you get in this group. He's been living in the dungeon and surviving off of its natural resources for years, so on top of that giving him all of his recipe ideas, he also has an intimate knowledge on how the dungeon's ecosystem works, and is happy to share his fun nature facts anytime the situation would call for it. Being a very hard work and elbow grease kind of guy, Senji also has a bit of a disdain for magic, which puts him at the occasional odds with Marcel, seeing magic as unnatural and a way to take the easy way around tasks instead of just doing them the old-fashioned way. Lastly, Chochuk is the no-nonsense guy who keeps the group on track when they're getting a little too chaotic. He has a bit of a rude bite to most of what he says, but it's not entirely without merit. Despite his small size, Chill is the guy who calls the other members out on their crap or whenever they're being too reckless and gives them the old Chochuk what for. Despite always trying to act hardened and tough, he has his subtle ways of showing legitimate concern for the others on a more personal level. He's like that friend who always tries to act hard, but you know deep down inside, he just loves the heck out of you. Despite our characters being underground during nearly the entirety of the story, there's a lot more world building than one might expect. And I'm not just talking about the history of the dungeon itself. Though its darkened halls do have a lot going on to keep the viewer from getting bored while the story progresses. On the more natural side of things, a complex ecosystem is kept in mind as the main party carries on. Through Senji's knowledge of the dungeon and Laios' obsession with monsters, things like standing climate, vegetation growth, and predatory habits of certain monster species is explained seamlessly within the story. There's also a whole world on the surface with various organizations and groups that have or may have an effect on the dungeon itself. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is called Dungeon Meshy, not Surface Meshy. I no care for this. Hey now, stick with me here. The writing uses pretty creative ways to present this information, and tease the interest and intentions that larger groups may have. The ancient old guy I mentioned at the beginning did promise a kingdom full of ancient magical power for those who conquer it. A lot of powerful people want a piece of that. The gold and treasures that adventurers find down in the dungeon also tend to have an effect on the economy of the town above. The story often trickles in bits of surface lore through clever uses of other adventurer parties the main characters encounter throughout their travels. For example, some explorers might be from a different nation or a scholar working for some higher up figure, and it's through their intentions and goals that we get bits and pieces of what's going on the world above. The use of flashbacks that the main party has is also a vehicle for elaborating on some of the more finer details, along with more insight into the characters themselves. But enough talk on character dynamics and world building. One of the greatest parts of the story that I really appreciate is that it never forgets to just have fun. So many other stories with fun, interesting concepts tend to lose themselves in things like melodramas and grittiness that can just feel forced. Obviously, there's a lot of deeper stuff going on here, like the main party's motivation to find their friend Fallon, as well as other plot elements I don't want to get into for spoilers' sake. It would be easy for the story to get too high on its own drama and lose sight of what it really is. Delicious in Dungeon, despite all that's going on, never forget that at its core it is a story about an adventure party that is forced to survive by eating monsters, and all the fun, weird kookiness that comes with that. I mentioned before that the main characters occasionally get into small spats with each other, though this never feels too overplayed. For example, Chochuk being hard on the others due to recklessness, Senji and Marcel's spats about magic, and Laios just being Laios. It is never characters yelling at each other for the sake of just yelling at each other. It is often settled with a better plan moving forward, or genuine character development that you see for the rest of the show's run. And through all of this, small jokes are often made whenever things are feeling a little too serious. And as our heroes progress into the deeper floors, where battles get tougher, stakes get higher, even still, through humor and other subtle devices, the writing has its ways of reminding you what it really is. An adventure story that's meant to be fun. Disagreements come, but the party members are still in it together. Characters die, but they're often revived with magic anyway, so there's no need to take things overly seriously. The writing is aware of this, and it makes sure the viewer remains aware of it as well. Just have fun with it. And that's it. That's Dungeon Meshi. That's Delicious in Dungeon. Now, I haven't read the manga, so I don't know how the story proceeds after the conclusion of the first season. Though I did just break out my big boy wallet and put a pre-order down on the box set, so more on that situation later. But I think if it carries on with this attitude, it could really be an era-defining series. You even got non-anime fans coming and singing the show's praises, and it is so rare that you get a show that bridges the gap between the otakus and the regular people. And even more rare considering this isn't an action shonen series like DBZ or Jujutsu Kaisen. But as it stands right now, I think this is something special and very worth checking out if you haven't already. And considering I've been hearing about the manga for what feels like years before the anime was even announced, I just can't help but have high hopes for what's to come.
So